Hi, friends. I have been working my way through this Susie Larson devotional recently, Prevail. It's just a page a day. It's like a Bible passage, a short reflection. It's super doable. So if you're looking to get back into a routine of reading the Bible and taking a little time to reflect, check this out. It starts by working its way through the Bible. So early on, it's talking about the Old Testament. And there was a particular day that really stood out to me. I journaled about it. I keep coming back to it. It's titled, Remember Not to Forget. It's based on the Israelites in Deuteronomy chapter 4. So just a quick recap to bring you up to speed. The Israelites are God's people. They were slaves in Egypt for 600 years, which is a lot of generations. Like all they knew was captivity. But God sets in motion a plan to write a new story, one of freedom. God sends Moses as a messenger to ask Pharaoh to release them. God sends supernatural plagues. When they do get released, God parts the Red Sea. He leads them in a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, which I feel like we don't talk about that enough. Like how cool that not only was he like directing them like a map, but I assume that means that the cloud provided them with shade during the daytime and the pillar of fire was heat in the cold desert nights. Past that, he literally feeds them. He's got supernatural meals for them each day, the manna and quail. So basically at every turn, God provides for his people. And still, they have a tendency to forget God's faithfulness. So in Deuteronomy 4:9, they're told, watch out. Be careful never to forget what you yourself have seen. Do not let these memories escape from your mind as long as you live. And be sure to pass them on to your children and your grandchildren. Well, as a mom, any direction to pass something on to my children or my grandchildren like already has my attention. This is a specific direction for parents, right? Well, I believe we are tasked with both sharing the Bible with our kids, God's stories of how he's at work in the lives of his people, and we get to share our personal account of God's work in our own lives. I think it's easy to look at the story of the Israelites and be like, God did so many things for them. How could they possibly forget? But when I actually take a look at my own life, I see how easily I forget, even in the small things. Like, I got to tell you guys, when I am sick, I mean, I'm a mom, so I do all the things I need to take care of the kids and stuff. But in my heart, I'm like, I can't remember what it was like to be well. Will I ever feel good again? And so, I mean, pause. Now, if you are feeling good right now or you got a good night's sleep, celebrate it because the next time your kids give you a runny nose, you might be feeling the way I felt. So this devotional kind of coincided with some things that my kids were learning in school. They've been talking about oral histories. Have you heard that term before? It's how people groups and cultures across time, the Israelites included, have shared stories, how they pass them down from one generation to the next. Your family is building an oral history based on what stories and messages you repeat over and over again, and probably what topics you avoid too. The stories you care enough to share with your children are communicating not only the history of your family, but values and words of wisdom. It got me thinking, what stories do our family, the Wahlund family, tell over and over again? Because those stories are shaping our family's culture. Well, one story that comes up for us frequently in our own family, with friends, is the story of our youngest son, Archer's birth, because moms talk about that, right? We share our birth stories. People ask you about how many kids you have. Are you done having kids? Maybe we overshare. But it comes up a lot. So the short version is that Archer's birth was rough. Through a series of unfortunate events, I nearly bled out, and Archer's birthday marks the day that we nearly both went to meet Jesus early. And I don't want to freak any moms out. If you're having a baby, just know that God sees you and your child. He loves you and he's with you. This is my story. It is not your story. So don't take that on. But even in the midst of this really traumatic birth experience, God showed up for us in so many ways. First of all, both my mother-in-law and her mom, so my husband's grandma, and a family friend woke up in the middle of the night worried about me the night that I was at the hospital, and they prayed for me. Second, there was an OB on call who I am 98% sure is a believer, who stepped in to get me an emergency C-section just in the nick of time. And Third, even though Archer wasn't breathing when he was first delivered and his initial APGAR score was atrocious, it rebounded miraculously. Like the nurses commented that this doesn't happen. And even after that, like we were so thankful that we were both safe and we were bringing this beautiful baby home, but we didn't know like if he would have health complications long term because of this birth. But now he is a first grader who is able to read fluently. He wants to do like multiplication problems, and he is probably the most athletic member of our family. So he is healthy and developing at an amazing rate, which we're so thankful for and are so grateful for God's work in his life. Well, I think that as human beings, we pick up on layers of stories as we mature and we're able to handle more. So yes, our kids know that when Archer was born, it was scary. Mom had a surgery. We're thankful that they're okay. But over time, what other things are they learning from this story? What is it communicating about our family culture? Well, one, it tells us that the Holy Spirit prompts us. We had 3 people pray for me when I really needed it. So if there's a time that somebody comes to mind for you, maybe in the middle of the night, maybe randomly during the day, that would be a good cue to say a prayer for them. Maybe they really need it right now. It also communicates things about like the body of Christ. So people prayed for us, but people also showed up to support us. They brought us food. They helped with childcare. They were there for that transition while I was healing from my C-section. And most of those people are in our lives and prioritized caring for one another because of our shared faith in Jesus. I also think it's important to acknowledge, and this kind of occurred to me later, that this story is teaching our family that hard things happen, even when we do our best to make good choices. Like, I didn't do anything wrong for Archer or me to be in danger, but the world is broken and bad things happen. We can heal and recover from hard situations, and the goodness of God can still be seen in those hardships. So that was obviously a major event. Another big role that stories have played in our ongoing story is we have people ask us about Ryan's career. So my husband Ryan went through law school when we were first married, and we made a lot of sacrifices in order for that to happen. Like living on one income when you're 23 is hard. But Ryan excelled in school. He eventually had the opportunity to work in litigation at a law firm where he participated in one of their biggest trial wins to date. But that big win was one of the things that made him realize, like, if this is as good as it gets, this maybe isn't where I should be, because it was sucking his soul dry. He looked around and realized that all the successful people he knew in his firm and really his career trajectory were not people he wanted to become. He saw broken marriages, disconnected parents, addiction, and depression. And I, again, want to pause there to acknowledge that there are wonderful, God-fearing attorneys in the world. We know some of them, and the world needs them. But it was becoming clear that this wasn't the long-term path for our family, and that was scary. It was a big change from the plans that we had made together. We'd been working towards a goal, and now it felt like the goal might be the thing that would destroy us. So we had lots and lots of conversations about how any career move needed to be intentional. Ryan did tons of informational interviews with people who had left the law to pursue another career. He talked to people who had similar strengths, who worked in different industries. He did the research. We prayed a lot. And eventually, not right away, Ryan felt like God kind of released him and gave him this impression like, okay, you don't have to be an attorney anymore. And that Holy Spirit confirmation was so freeing, but it also sustained us as we built something new. It was hard to transition to a new path, and we had some really lean years. But that choice led to a stronger marriage, to so much more family time, balance in our lives, and ultimately space for the things that we truly value. So, of course, that story comes up a lot because people ask Ryan lawyer questions even today. And he gets a chance to tell them about the journey God has led him on to a healthier, fuller life for our family. Meanwhile, our kids are hearing that too. They get to hear not only about Ryan changing jobs, that's like a practicality, our history, but they get to learn about prayer, how we prayerfully considered things, about the process, right, to making that change. And they also are learning like why we made that change. What things do the Wahlund family really value? In this instance, it was talking about time together, healthy relationships, margin. So those are big stories, right? And I think it's easy to look for God in the big stuff when we have like a huge decision to make. But there's all kinds of little ones too. Like Literally this morning, I woke up and my back was like tweaked because that must be the reality of getting older. And I mentioned it when I was downstairs helping my middle schooler with breakfast, and he came over and hugged me and said a simple prayer over me, which kind of surprised me. He was like, "Dear Jesus, please heal Mom's back." And I can't tell you how much I want to go home tonight and tell him, like, God healed me. It mattered that you prayed for me. Or I have been telling my kids since they were toddlers and they misplay something, that I'm usually pretty good about keeping track of my stuff. But eventually, I can't tell you how often I get to the point where I'm like, okay, God, where is that book? Where is that thing? And he gives me this nudge and like, there it was under the couch or whatever it is. And so we've talked about that for years, that they know, like, we just say like, okay, God, we need your help. Where do we find that thing? And so he's showing up for us in big things and small things. Psalm 78:4 says, we will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power, and the wonders he's done. And honestly, I think that these stories come up more and more readily the older our kids get, because we have elementary and middle school kids. Like now they are living eras of their life that Ryan and I remember, right? Like we remember being in 6th grade and feeling lonely. And I can recount specifically like showing up at church youth group and those 2 friends that said, hey, Amanda, come sit by us, like just when I needed it, and how much that meant to me. Or they have conflict with their siblings or even with us as parents, and we recount our own stories of navigating that. But there are lots of stories, if you like really think about what has shaped you and your relationship with Jesus, that you might want to share with your kids and you don't quite know how to do that. So here are some practical suggestions. I'm all about the list. Like, what do we do now? Number 1, weave storytelling into recurring occasions. Birthdays are an easy one. I already told you about Archer's birth, but each of our kids has their own birth story of how God blessed us with their life, how we wanted them in our family, and God answered our prayers. And they also know like funny tidbits about the actual events of their birthday. Anniversaries are another great one. Like so often we're thinking about how do we strengthen our marriage, which is so important. Like we're going to go on a date to celebrate, but what a great opportunity for you to tell your kids about what led you and your husband together. Like this is a chance for you to talk about all the things you love about him and tell them about what you dreamed of together, maybe the way God's brought those dreams to fruition, or even how God has changed and maybe expanded your dreams together. You get to bring your kids into that story. Number 2, write it down. Use a Post-it note so you remember to mention it to them later, or journal, or you could even make a family list of answered prayers or ways that God has shown up for you in the week. Number 3, get a physical reminder in your space. So Joshua 4:20-24 says, Joshua set up 12 stones that they had taken out of the Jordan River. He said to the Israelites, in the future, when your descendants ask their fathers, what do these stones mean? Tell them, Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God did to the Jordan just what he had done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us until we had crossed over. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God. So in this instance, it was specifically like stones from the river. There are lots of other places in the Bible where people set up a pillar or an altar to remember something that God did, something amazing. You can do the same thing in your house. You could frame a photo that reminds you of that time in your life, or maybe you have a special Bible verse posted. It could be a decorative object. It could be something symbolic, like maybe it's sea glass you found on the North Shore. Anything that triggers that remembrance and points you back to God's work in your family and might cause you to tell the story again. Number 4, try habit stacking. That's the idea of tacking one habit onto another. So for you, it might be like bath time or a bedtime routine. For us, our family already has Friday night pizza movie night. So that could be an easy place for us to add a tradition. Like while we eat our pizza, we could go around the circle and share one story where we felt God showed up for us or protected us or answered our prayer that week. So even though all these things are so important, I just quickly want to call out one more thing. And that is that while the stories you tell your children are super important for your family culture, the stories you tell yourself are also really powerful. So if you are telling yourself, oh, I'm such an angry mom, or maybe I'm not cut out for this at all. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Feelings follow focus. So I'm not saying that you should like stuff that down deep or sugarcoat it, pretend that you don't feel those feelings, because I think it is important to acknowledge. But get with a good friend that you can trust. Tell them how you're feeling. Bring it out into the light so that you can pray together, have support, and ask God to reframe that. Because when we let those feelings like fester, it does rob us of seeing all like the beautiful ways that God is walking with you through that hard season. Because the hard season is real, but God has a whole new story He wants to write for you, and He's weaving it into something beautiful. So be intentional about the stories you are telling to your children. Be intentional about the stories you are telling to yourself, because God's writing a beautiful one for you.